Imagine yourself transported back to the rolling hills of 16th century France, a land steeped in both natural beauty and deep-seated superstition. It was a time when the line between the natural and the supernatural was often blurred, when stories could easily transform from simple tales into accepted truths. In this world, a story emerged that blurred the lines between man and monster, reality and folklore, leaving an indelible mark on history. It began quietly, almost imperceptibly, in the dark and foreboding woods near Dole, a region known for its dense forests and isolated settlements. At the center of this unsettling tale is a man named Gilles Garnier, a simple hermit, a recluse seeking solace in the solitude of the woods, whose life would soon be irrevocably altered, becoming anything but simple. Garnier's tale is not just a story, it's one of the most unsettling and perplexing cases of its time, a chilling chapter ripped from the pages of true crime history, a case that continues to fascinate and disturb us centuries later. He lived in the 1570s, a period when superstition and fear were not just abstract concepts, but powerful forces that shaped daily life, influencing decisions and coloring perceptions of the world. In this era, the forest was more than just a collection of trees. It was both a source of life, providing sustenance and resources, and a source of terror, a place of unknown dangers and lurking shadows. What set Garnier apart from other criminals of his time wasn't just the horrific nature of his crimes, but the utterly bizarre and unsettling explanation he offered for his actions. He claimed, in all seriousness, to be a werewolf, a creature of myth and legend capable of transforming from man to beast under the light of the moon. This astonishing confession tapped directly into a widespread panic that was already sweeping across Europe. A fear of the unknown, a belief in dark forces, and a growing unease about the very nature of humanity. Garnier's case presented an unprecedented challenge, forcing the legal system, rooted in reason and logic, to confront a crime that seemed to defy any rational explanation, pushing the boundaries of what they could comprehend. The story of Gilles Garnier is far more than just a historical account of a brutal killer. It's a fascinating window into a world gripped by fear, superstition, and profound social change, a world on the cusp of modernity, yet still clinging to ancient beliefs. For many in the 16th century, werewolves represented the ultimate betrayal of human nature, the complete and utter loss of humanity, the terrifying transformation of a familiar neighbor into a monstrous beast lurking in the shadows. Garnier's case quickly became a focal point for these deep-seated anxieties, forcing the people of his time and us today to question the very foundations of belief, the nature of justice, and the potential for darkness that resides within the human heart. Over the course of this exploration, we'll delve into his solitary existence as a hermit, the gruesome crimes that ultimately brought him to justice, and the wave of cultural panic and hysteria that ultimately sealed his grim fate. This is not a fanciful fairy tale about a mythical monster conjured from the depths of imagination. This is the story of a real person, a man named Gilles Garnier, whose horrific and inexplicable actions could only be understood, or at least explained in his time, through the lens of the supernatural, a world where werewolves were not just legends, but terrifying possibilities. Before the whispers of werewolves, there was just a man and his wife, living on the fringes of society. Gilles Garnier, the Hermit of St. Bonnot, struggled to provide for his new bride in the unforgiving forests of Franche-Comté. The forest, once his refuge, became barren and hostile, amplifying his desperation. Isolated and failing as a provider, Garnier's struggles grew, creating fertile ground for dark thoughts. The woods concealed him from the community, allowing his predatory behavior to go unnoticed as children began to disappear. His anonymity provided cover, and the forest became his hunting ground. In his despair, Garnier claimed he was approached by a demon offering a solution, a magical ointment to transform him into a wolf. The price: embrace his most primal, animalistic nature. Thus began his descent from desperate hermit to something far more sinister. To truly understand the tragic figure of Gilles Garnier, the man who would become known as the Werewolf of Dole, we must delve into his life before the infamy, before the accusations, before the legend took hold. We need to examine the circumstances that shaped him, the trials he faced, and the choices he made. He was not born a monster lurking in the shadows, but an ordinary man, a member of the peasantry, subject to the same hardships and vulnerabilities as anyone else in his time. He was a man of flesh and blood, with hopes and dreams, fears and anxieties. He chose the difficult and often lonely path of a hermit, deliberately stepping away from the comforts and securities of society, seeking solace, or perhaps simply survival in the solitude of the wilderness. This decision, born of necessity or perhaps a deeper yearning, would set him on a course that would ultimately lead to his downfall. His days were spent in a crude, self-built hut, a simple shelter against the elements. He eked out a meager existence, surviving on what he could find through foraging in the forests and hunting whatever game he could manage to catch. It was a life of constant struggle against the unforgiving forces of nature, a relentless battle for survival in a world that offered little in the way of comfort or security. Every day was a test of his resilience and his ability to endure. A single harsh winter, a debilitating injury, or a prolonged period of scarcity could easily mean disaster, pushing him to the brink of starvation or even death. The margins were thin, and the stakes were incredibly high. This existence inevitably shaped him into a tough, resourceful individual, skilled in the ways of the wilderness, but also an isolated figure, cut off from human contact and increasingly vulnerable to the darker impulses that can fester in solitude. Marriage changed everything, bringing the promise of companionship, a shared life, and perhaps even a glimmer of hope for a better future. But it also brought immense pressure to provide for his new wife, a burden that weighed heavily on his shoulders and amplified the already existing anxieties of survival. Each failed hunt, each empty trap, each day that passed without food only deepened his frustration, intensified his despair, and chipped away at his already fragile sense of hope. The mounting pressure, the constant hunger, and the gnawing fear of failure were pushing him closer and closer to the edge of sanity. This background paints a portrait not of a monster born, but of a man driven to desperation, a man teetering on the precipice of a terrible transformation. He was a victim of circumstance, a product of the crushing poverty and profound isolation that defined his existence. His story, though horrific, serves as a chilling example of how extreme hardship, when combined with isolation and desperation, can erode the very foundations of humanity, leading to unimaginable acts. Before he was branded as the Werewolf of Dole, a creature of nightmare and legend, he was simply a poor hermit, struggling to survive against impossible odds. It was from this desperate struggle, from this crucible of hardship and isolation, that his dark and terrifying journey began, a journey that would forever stain the pages of history. The turning point, as Garnier told it, was a supernatural encounter in the woods. He claimed a demon appeared, offering him the power to hunt without hunger in exchange for allegiance. The demon gave him a magical ointment, promising transformation into a wolf. In 16th century France, belief in the devil's meddling was mainstream, and Garnier's story fit the narrative of temptation and damnation. Whether delusion or calculated defense, his tale transformed a criminal case into a sensational story of supernatural horror. The magical ointment became a tangible link to the supernatural, making his claims seem real to judges and public alike. Garnier's narrative elevated his crimes from murder to a battle with evil itself. By 1572, fear gripped the communities around Dole. Children vanished, and bodies were found bearing marks of a savage beast. Witnesses described a creature neither fully wolf nor man, moving with unnatural speed. In an era of werewolf hysteria, the conclusion was inevitable: a werewolf stalked the countryside. Authorities responded with a proclamation authorizing the hunt for the monster. The panic became an organized manhunt, with every citizen deputized. During the search, villagers found Garnier crouched over a victim, bloodied but in human form. The evidence, though circumstantial, was overwhelming. The quiet hermit was thrust into the center of their nightmare. The whispers had found their source. In custody, Garnier faced intense interrogation. The authorities were determined to uncover the truth behind the horrifying events that had plagued the region. They pressed him relentlessly, seeking to understand the motives and methods behind his alleged crimes. Under immense pressure, and perhaps influenced by the prevailing beliefs of the time, he soon confessed. The confession was meticulously documented, each word carefully transcribed onto parchment. He admitted to stalking, attacking, and killing at least 4 children over several months. The details he provided painted a gruesome picture of his alleged actions, sending shockwaves through the community. The disappearances had cast a dark shadow, and Garnier's confession offered a disturbing explanation. His confession was chillingly detailed, a disturbing account that left no room for doubt in the minds of his interrogators. It was a narrative blending verifiable facts with supernatural claims, a reflection of the era's complex understanding of the world. He spoke of ordinary acts alongside extraordinary events, blurring the lines between reality and the realm of the fantastical. Garnier insisted he acted as a wolf, recounting his pact with the demon and the magical ointment that facilitated his transformation. He claimed to have willingly embraced the dark arts, seeking power and succumbing to the allure of the supernatural. He described transforming into a beast, driven by insatiable hunger, a primal urge that consumed his humanity. The transformation, he said, was both terrifying and exhilarating, a descent into a savage state of being. He confessed to killing a 10-year-old girl, providing specific details about the event. He admitted to attacking others and even sharing human flesh with his wife, disguised as game, further implicating himself in the heinous crimes. This detail in particular highlighted the depravity of his alleged actions. The disappearances were real. His confession provided answers and a culprit, bringing a sense of closure to the terrified community, even if the truth was almost too horrific to bear. The werewolf element confirmed the public's worst fears, fitting the narrative perfectly, tapping into deeply ingrained superstitions and anxieties. It provided a framework for understanding the inexplicable, solidifying the belief in dark forces at play. Today, it's impossible to separate truth from delusion or coercion, to definitively determine the extent to which his confession was genuine or influenced by external factors. For the court, the confession was taken as a whole, its individual components inseparable from the overall narrative. They believed they had caught not just a murderer, but a man who had given himself to demonic forces, a heretic who had defied God and embraced the darkness. Garnier's fate was sealed by his own words, his confession serving as the ultimate condemnation. Garnier's trial in January 1573 was a public spectacle, drawing crowds from across the region. The prosecution relied on his confession and witness testimony, painting a damning picture. The court was not just trying a murderer, but a case of witchcraft and lycanthropy. Garnier did not recant, repeating his story of demonic pacts and transformation. To modernize, his testimony suggests mental illness or coercion, but to the court, it confirmed their beliefs. The verdict was swift, guilty of murder, cannibalism, and lycanthropy. The judges declared he had abandoned God for the devil, using demonic powers to terrorize the land. The trial sent a powerful message. The authorities could fight supernatural evil. The hermit's fate was now inescapable. The court sentenced Garnier to a public, painful death, burning at the stake. This execution was reserved for the worst offenders, believed to cleanse the soul and destroy evil. On January 18, 1573, Garnier was taken to a public square in Dole, where a crowd gathered to witness his end. For the community, it was a ritual of purification and closure. Before the flames, he was tortured, as was common, to extract any final confessions. As the fire consumed him, the Werewolf of Dole story ended in public spectacle. His ashes were scattered, ensuring no grave or relic remained. The authorities had restored order, and the panic began to subside. The children were still gone, but the monster was dead. The legend, however, was just beginning. Garnier's story did not end with his execution. It became legend. Detailed court records ensured his case would be remembered for centuries. He became a symbol of the werewolf panic, blurring fact and folklore. Over time, his story evolved, transforming him from desperate man to supernatural monster in popular imagination. The legacy is complex, a historical document and a cautionary tale about fear and justice. Today, we see Garnier as a troubled individual, likely suffering from poverty, isolation, and mental illness. Our understanding has shifted from supernatural to psychological causes. He remains a tragic, terrifying figure, a reminder of the darkness within the human mind. His story warns of the dangers of mass hysteria and fear-driven justice. The hermit of the French countryside became a haunting presence in history, forever remembered as the Werewolf of Dole.